The kind of audacity, and nobody does audacity like Meghan.
44 official photos. One event. And out of all those frames, Meghan Markle only shows up side by side with two people, not Don Johnson, not Michael Keaton, not Carey Mulligan, the actual star of the night. Just the Netflix CEO and his wife. That's the real headline from the Beef Season 2 screening at Ted Sarandos' Montecito home on Friday, April 10th. Not the shark drays every tabloid was obsessing over, not the rare joint appearance. The photo record speaks for itself, 44 frames, all credited to Stephanie Keenan of Getty Images, shot for Netflix. And the A-list guest list? It reads like a who's who of people who apparently had zero interaction with the Duchess of Sussex worth capturing on camera. Here's what people need to understand about official photo drops from a Netflix PR event. Nothing is accidental.
They made sure that Carey Mulligan did not come in until Meghan Markle had left. And she didn't want to leave. She was making everybody's life a misery because she wanted to be present because she's the Duchess. But no, honey, you have lost big time. That's how much Meghan Markle's stock has fallen. She was kicked out and Harry was embarrassed and apologizing to Ted Sarandos once again for his wife's lack of sensitivity or listening to people or following a simple dress code.
Keenan is one of the most seasoned entertainment photographers in Los Angeles. She shoots premieres, she shoots Oscar parties, she does not miss the headline guest standing next to Michael Keaton. If a pairing happens in that room, it ends up on the Getty server. And if it doesn't end up there, that's usually because the pairing never happened or because someone made a very deliberate call about what leaves the room. And before anyone says this is just reaching, hold that thought. Because the whole upstaging angle only works if Meghan was actually in the frame with other guests long enough to upstage anyone. The photo record says she wasn't.
She is very, very worried, nervous. She's on the back foot. She knows Netflix is gone. She knows Netflix is moving on. And she's sort of freaking out about it. They know the gravy train is ending and they're just doing anything as humanly possible to gain attention.
Well, Brittany, none of this was a good look. None of this was a good look. She looks truly deranged. We know what she's trying to do here. The problem is, Brittany, it changes nothing. The fact that Ted Sarandos wants her to try and promote beef.
It says she was photographed with the host, with the host's wife, and then tucked into a group shot at the edge. That's it. Forget the dress. Look at who she has no pictures with. Don Johnson was there. So was Michael Keaton with his partner Marnie Turner, John Corbett, Nick Kroll, Oscar Isaac, Kaylee Spaney, Charles Melton, Orlando Bloom, Justin Trudeau, awkwardly described by Fox News as Katy Perry's boyfriend, and Lee Sung-jin, the creator of the show.
I mean, she doesn't care about her reputation, does she? Or does she think that the Duchess of Sussex title can take on anything and nothing's going to happen to it? That title, it's already devalued, depreciated, and valued completely. How embarrassing. And no, Meghan Markle doesn't have a model body.
It is gross. And trust me, I know how fake Hollywood is. I know how fake the entertainment industry is. But Meghan Markle and the Sussex Squad think this is a win for her. Think that this in some way disproves everything that has gone on with Netflix. It doesn't. All she looks is nuts. Totally crazy. Clinging on to Ted Sarandos' wife for dear life.
Every single one of them showed up to celebrate Carey Mulligan, Beef Season 2's actual headliner. Not one of them appears in an individual photo with Meghan Markle. Not one. Now, to be straight here, this is exactly where tabloids usually oversell, so let's stick to what's confirmed. The official Getty drop put out 44 photos. Meghan appears in the group shot with Harry and the Osages. She appears hugging Nicole Avant. She appears posing solo with Ted Sarandos and his wife. Hollywood Reporter, Fox News, Page 6, The Daily Mail, none of them highlighted a single Meghan plus A-lister pairing beyond the CEO and his wife. Not one.
Here's the detail that makes this story even more delicious. 2 weeks before this party, Carey Mulligan walked into Windsor Castle and received a CBE from King Charles, Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Her husband Marcus Mumford was by her side. It was one of the proudest moments of her career. And then, 14 days later, the woman who left that very institution showed up at Carrie's Netflix celebration wearing the same color, pulling focus in exactly the way she always does.
Getty Images removed all the pictures from Harry and Meghan Markle at that event. But I think you noticed something here, right? You can see that Carey Mulligan is wearing green. She's the only one wearing green because that was the whole point of it, that she was the star of the show and people had been told to wear black and white so she would stand out because all of these are promotional pictures. The whole show is about her. Meghan Markle had to show up wearing exactly the same color dress as the star of the show.
The press distributed pairings that Netflix pushed, both of them. Think about what that means. Don Johnson is a Miami Vice legend, Michael Keaton is Batman, Beetlejuice, a two-time Oscar nominee. Carey Mulligan is the literal star the whole night was thrown for.
You think this is a big victory, and that somehow all of the stories, which are factual, which is that Netflix has dumped your because Was Never is the worst lifestyle brand in the history of lifestyle brands. Because what was that show called? I can't even remember. With Love Meghan. With Love Meghan was the worst piece of lifestyle TV programming in the history of lifestyle TV programming. And the fact that they even unfollowed you, Ted included, on social media.
It's obviously such a PR move from Netflix in a way, because they know Harry and Meghan, the one thing they can get from the couple for sure is publicity, nothing else. Her to try and make this Hollywood thing work. And despite maybe getting an invitation, or more likely inviting themselves to this event, Harry and Meghan are not doing well in Hollywood. The future is, in fact, is looking quite bleak for them in the entertainment industry.
These are not people who don't know who Meghan Markle is. These are people who are physically in the same garden, drinking the same wine, sitting through the same moderated conversation, and the record shows not one of them stood next to her long enough for a photographer to press the shutter. This isn't a story about Meghan upstaging anyone. It's a story about Meghan orbiting and not even landing in the right orbit. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable. The one photo that dominated every outlet, the Nicole Avant hug, didn't land the way her team wanted it to. Judy James writes body language analysis for the Daily Mail. She's been doing it for 20 years and is one of the most quoted, credentialed body language commentators in the UK. When she writes something, the 5+ female audience across London, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane reads it and files it away. James described Meghan's behaviour at the Sarandos home as exaggerated displayed attachment rituals. But the line that actually cut deep?
The body language here is interesting because Ted and Nicole are leaning into each other. But Meghan is leaning towards Nicole as if she's separating herself from Harry. And of course, she's here clutching Nicole's hand. And it's very strange.
The relationship is screwed. And the fact that Meghan is so crazed to think that we are just going to take some really weird pictures as evidence rather than actually very in-depth reporting, which has been going on for months and months and months, and now has been confirmed by Variety, the Hollywood Bible, just shows that she really does take people for fools. And that is her problem.
James wrote that the way Ted and Nicole held their couple's pose in the foursome shot made it look almost as though Meghan is photobombing their pose. Photobombing. That's the word a Daily Mail body language analyst used about a duchess at an event she was invited to. Not integrated, not central, photobombing her own hosts. And here's the context that makes all of this land harder. 24 days before that event, on March 17th, Variety published what many are calling the most damaging piece of reporting the Sussex brand has taken since the Spotify collapse. Matt Donnelly's investigation cited 6 sources inside Netflix. One of them, in an attributed claim from a named outlet, not speculation, said the mood inside the Netflix building was, "We're done." 3 insiders told Variety that Ted Sarandos himself is fed up with the pair. And in the same piece, UTA CEO Jeremy Zimmer went on record saying Meghan Markle was,
Maybe, you know what? Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe Ted is now friends with Meghan. Let's look at that. After such a display of friendship, Meghan Markle laughing, maybe he followed her on Instagram. Of course not. Of course not.
Not a great audio talent or necessarily any kind of talent. That quote is originally from 2023, 3 years old, and Variety brought it back in March 2026 because apparently the shoe still fits. So here's why the hug matters. Meghan didn't show up to the Sarandos home on April 10th to celebrate Beef Season 2. She went because 6 Variety sources had just told a journalist that her biggest remaining Hollywood relationship was radioactive and she needed one photo to prove otherwise. One photo, that was the brief. And her own body language analyst, writing in the same paper readers enjoy with their morning tea, called the result exaggerated attachment and photobombing.
This is not the first time, not even close. Remember Prince Louis christening in July 2018? The entire royal family wore cream, white, and soft blue, and Meghan showed up in an olive green outfit, the only splash of color in this entire lineup. Different event, different year, same pattern. Meghan has never met a room she didn't try to make about herself.
That's not damage control. That's damage confirmation. Now, the dress, because every outlet in this space ran the same Heidi Merrick angle, and that's exactly why they all missed the bigger story. Carey Mulligan wore Charge too. Same color family. Same event. That's the fashion story. Tabloids ran with Meghan upstages, Beef Season 2, star in matching dress. But flip that framing around and the whole thing collapses. Carey Mulligan is a 3-time Oscar nominee. She was the featured talent of the night. She was photographed next to the show's creator.
It's Meghan Markle's superpower of taking on a beautiful dress and uglying it up. Not only has Meghan Markle uglied her dress and has given her a bad rep, but Meghan Markle hasn't paid for it. I mean, at a certain point, this woman should be accused of theft.
She was photographed with Oscar Isaac. She was photographed in the group with Kaylee Spaney. Meghan got a Chartres dress, a hug with the CEO's wife, and a caption in Judy James's column calling her a photobomber. Here's what makes this whole situation even wilder. Heidi Merrick, the designer Meghan wore that night, is a Montecito-based designer, and Meghan has worn her before. This wasn't some random pull from a rack. This was a deliberate outfit choice for a deliberate PR moment at a deliberately chosen venue. Every single variable was controlled by her team. They knew Carey Mulligan would be there. They had the guest list. They knew the photographer. And after all that careful planning,
this one is the only picture which survived with the Getty Images. And here you can see Meghan Markle earlier in the evening standing there. You can see everybody else is wearing black and white. The star of the show is not there yet. She arrived a little bit later. Carey Mulligan, the star of the show, arrived a little bit later after you see that picture, and Meghan Markle and Prince Harry were asked to.
The outcome they engineered was a chartreuse dress that produced exactly 2 press-distributed pairings, both with the host household and nothing else. The upstaging angle only works if you start from the premise that Meghan was competing with the A-listers for attention, but the photo record tells a much more uncomfortable story. She wasn't competing. She was trying to survive an event where the A-listers had already moved on. Don Johnson doesn't need to upstage anyone. Michael Keaton doesn't need to upstage anyone. Carey Mulligan was the entire point of the night.
Meghan's smart. She knows what she's doing in some ways, and she's also super desperate. And so she's like, I'll wear the same color. Meghan choosing colors that deliberately clash and trying to steal attention is very, very Meghan, very desperate, very D-list actress, which is what she's always been.
Meghan wasn't being upstaged, she was being politely left alone. And the photo record only fully clicks into place once you look at the numbers Ted Sarandos is actually staring at on Monday morning. With Love, Meghan Season 1 Netflix ranking in the first half of 2025, 380th. Season 2 ranking in the second half of 2025, 1,217th. Not a show winding down, a show that has gone virtually invisible on the very platform that produced it. Polo, the 2024 documentary about Harry's favorite sport, was reported by Hollywood Reporter as a title that did not blow the ratings out of the water, pulling 1.1 million views.
She had to ruin or tried to ruin Carey Mulligan's moment, and it showed that Harry and Meghan Markle have lost their pull to be asked to leave a party. That's how bad things were for this woman, and she left angrily. She wasn't smiling when she left.
For context, Netflix's own breakout docuseries regularly post 30 to 50 million. Live to Lead 700,000 views in 6 months. Heart of Invictus, roughly 300,000. And Page 6 reported in January 2026 that with Love, Meghan isn't returning as a series. A Sussex spokesperson later reframed that to Variety as the show continuing as a seasonal special. Same meaning, softer wording, and the room can absolutely tell the difference. Then there's the as-ever situation. Netflix formally exited its equity stake in Meghan's lifestyle brand on March 6th.
They rejected Cookie Queens, forcing Harry and Meghan to go with the begging bowl out to the Sundance Film Festival. Honestly, Cookie Queens would have been like pocket money for Ted Sarandos. He could have bought that movie in a flash. And then the big one, of course, which is the confirmation that Netflix no longer has anything to do with As Ever. That is it. That is all we need to know.
2026. Variety reported that Netflix was sitting on more than $10 million of unsold As Ever inventory, some of it reportedly handed to Netflix employees for free on card tables in the office. Let that sink in for a second. A royal-branded lifestyle product line sitting on Netflix shelves, being given away in the lobby. The company took the financial loss, issued a polite statement, and walked away. This is the context every other outlet is skipping over. The beef photo op didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened 24 days after Variety's 6-source piece, 4 days after Netflix formally exited As Ever, and on the exact same day that a defamation lawsuit against Harry became public in the High Court of England and Wales. 2 separate situations burning on one calendar date, and the best image the Sussex camp could pull out of it was a hug that their own friendliest body language analyst called exaggerated. When that's the win, photo. The ones that didn't make the cut must tell an even bigger story, which might explain why so few of them did. Here's the honest bottom line. No one handed over court documents, proving Meghan was ignored at a Montecito garden party. There's no signed statement from Michael Keaton. None of us were in that garden. Everyone is working from the same public material, the 4-4 photo Getty drop, the Variety Insider reporting, the Judy James column, the platform ranking data, and the guest list every outlet published. But when you lay it all on one table, the pattern is hard to ignore. 144 official photos exist from that night, and Meghan appears in individual pairings with exactly 2 people, both from Netflix. 2, the guest list included at least 6 A-listers with global name recognition, and not one of them appears in an individual pairing with her in the press-distributed record. 3, the one pairing her team clearly wanted, the Nicole Avant hug, got labeled photobombing.
But Netflix is done with Harry and Meghan pretty much. Like, they're gonna have some peripheral interactions on some projects, but I don't think they have any real creative control over anything. I don't think Netflix is really gonna buy anything from them at this point, unless it's something actually quite good. And Harry and Meghan, they just have no creative talent here. They shouldn't have gone off to Hollywood. Meghan didn't make it before in Hollywood, and a royal title has not changed that.
An exaggerated attachment by the Daily Mail's own staff body language expert within hours. 4, Bella Bajaria, Netflix's CCO, went on record saying, "Don't believe whatever you read, there's no juicy story here." Fine. But when 6 people inside that building tell a Variety reporter, "We are done," a press release denial doesn't overrule that it just sits right next to it. 5, the day all of this went down, the chartreuse dress became the headline, and the 44 photos became the story everyone else missed. She didn't upstage anyone at the Sarandos home. She didn't need to. The room upstaged her by simply not standing next to her. And the photographer, one of the best in the business, filed 44 photos that tell you exactly which relationships in that garden were real and which ones were the ones somebody desperately needed for the morning papers. When the only people willing to be photographed with you are the 2 people hosting the party you didn't attend an event, you attended an audition, and the callback hasn't come. Let that framing sit for a second, because it matters more than anything else in this story. An audition, not a celebration, not a networking win, not a power move, an audition. And the casting directors, the A-listers, the creators, the talent, they looked at the room, they looked at each other, and not one of them walked over and said, "Let's get a photo." Not Don Johnson, not Michael Keaton, not Carey Mulligan, not Oscar Isaac, not Orlando Bloom, not Justin Trudeau, not Nick Kroll, not Charles Melton, not Kaylee Spaney, not Lee Sung-jin, the man who literally created the show the whole night was built around. These are not shy people. These are not people who avoid cameras. These are people who built entire careers on knowing exactly when and where to stand for a photograph. And every single one of them in a garden, at a private, intimate screening, with one of the most experienced entertainment photographers in Los Angeles pointing a lens, chose not to stand next to Meghan Markle for a single documented frame. That is not an accident. That is not a scheduling conflict. That is a choice made by multiple people, independently.
Netflix has got to realize that Harry and Meghan, the noise they generate, is basically always negative.
In the same garden, on the same night. Now here is where the audition metaphor really starts to sting. Because in Hollywood, an audition you don't get called back from isn't always dramatic. Nobody screams, nobody makes a scene. The room doesn't go cold. It's quieter than that. It's polite. It's professional. It's a smile across the garden and a turned shoulder and a conversation that starts just as you're walking over. It's 44 photos that all somehow manage to capture every other meaningful pairing in the room except yours. That's how Hollywood really works, not with a door slam, but with a photo that never gets taken. And the brutal part? Her team knew the assignment going in. They controlled every variable they could control. The designer, Montecito-based, previously worn, deliberate. The venue, the home of the most powerful man in her professional world. The timing, engineered to counter a six-source variety piece that had just described her biggest Hollywood relationship as radioactive. They did the work. They showed up prepared. They wore the right dress. They smiled the right smile. They brought the right energy. And the room still didn't bite. The room was cordial, warm even, and completely unmoved. That gap between the effort and the outcome is the most telling thing in this entire story, because when you control every variable and the result still doesn't land, it stops being a PR problem. It becomes a perception problem. And perception problems in Hollywood are a completely different kind of beast to manage, because you cannot press release your way out of how a room feels about you. So now the audition is over. The 44 photos are filed, the Judy James column is published, the variety piece is still sitting on every editor's desk. And the next chapter is already beginning roughly 72 hours after that Montecito garden party. Harry and Meghan are wheels up to Australia. Their first Australian tour since 2018. Let that timeline sink in. 2018 was a different world. Harry was still a full-time working royal. Meghan was still in the honeymoon phase with the British public and the Commonwealth. The crowds were massive. The energy was electric. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Australia genuinely loved them in 2018 and they left on a high. That was 7 years ago.
They've known now for sure that Meghan Markle cannot convert the way she claimed to in terms of products. As ever, products did not move. That's why they pulled out. And so they do know that the only thing Harry and Meghan can do is generate a lot of noise. And so they're leveraging that to help this series.
A lot has changed since then. This 2026 return is not landing the same way. Not even close. The commercial ticket prices for select events are reaching up to $3,199 Australian dollars. That's not a community event. That's not an accessible public appearance. That's a premium price point that immediately signals something that this tour is being run as a revenue-generating operation, not a goodwill mission. And Australians noticed. The reaction online was swift, and it was not warm. Then there's the security situation, and this one is genuinely explosive. A Change.org petition specifically opposing taxpayer-funded police protection for Harry and Meghan during this Australian visit crossed 43,000 signatures and was still climbing. 43,000 people, regular Australians, took time out of their day to sign a document saying they do not want their tax money used to protect this couple during a privately ticketed, commercially priced tour. That is not a fringe reaction. That is a significant, organised, documented public sentiment that the Australian government now has to navigate out loud. And here is what makes that security petition so much more uncomfortable than it might look on the surface. Harry is no longer a working royal. He walked away from the institution. He made that choice publicly, loudly, and on the record, in interviews, in a book, in a documentary series. He gave up the role that came with the protection. The British taxpayer is no longer footing that bill. So now the question lands on Australia, and 43,000 Australians are saying the answer is no. This is not about whether Harry and Meghan deserve to be safe. Of course they do. Everyone does. This is about optics, about public trust, about what it looks like when a couple charges $3,199 per ticket for a commercial event and then expects the public purse to cover the security bill for that same event. That tension is real, it's visible, and it does not have a clean PR answer. Now, here's what makes Melbourne specifically interesting. This is not just any city on the tour. Melbourne has a particular kind of energy, sharp, direct, culturally confident. It's a city that has no problem forming and expressing a strong opinion. It's also a city with a deep relationship to the Commonwealth, to the Crown, and to the question of what the monarchy means to modern Australia. The Republican movement in Australia is not new, but it is louder than it has been in years. And a Sussex visit in this climate, commercially priced, security petition generating, arriving fresh off a Netflix ranking disaster and a Variety six-source takedown, is walking into a conversation that was already happening without them. And somewhere inside this trip, somewhere in the schedule, in the crowd dynamics, in the media coverage, in the moments that don't get staged and can't get controlled, there is a moment coming.
If he can't bring him back yet, he's gonna make sure that he is seen in Hollywood, or that he doesn't lose face, and that, or that he saves face with Meghan Markle, especially after that Variety show came up.
A moment that I genuinely believe is going to define the next 6 months of this story. Not the photos that get taken, the ones that don't. Not the statements that get released, the reactions that happen before the statement is ready. Not the events that get planned. The ones that unfold in real time, on camera, in public, in front of an audience that hasn't been pre-screened, pre-ticketed, or pre-warmed. Because here's the thing about Australia in 2026 that nobody on the Sussex communications team can fully prepare for. The Australian media does not operate the same way the British tabloid press does. It doesn't operate the same way the American entertainment press does. Australian journalists are direct. Australian crowds are direct. And when something isn't landing, when the energy in the room doesn't match the energy on the press release, that gap shows up fast, and it shows up on camera, and it does not get softened in the edit. That's the moment I'm watching for. Not a confrontation, not a protest, not a dramatic incident. Something quieter and more devastating than any of that. A crowd that's thinner than the press release suggested. A question from a journalist that doesn't get a clean answer. A public appearance where the energy in the room tells a completely different story from the one the communications team filed that morning. Those are the moments that define narratives, not because they're explosive, but because they're real and everyone watching can feel the difference. And then there's the institution. The one the Sussexes cannot take to court, cannot spin through a Netflix documentary, cannot reframe in a Variety exclusive, cannot photograph their way around. The one that has been quietly, patiently, and very deliberately doing what institutions do when they've decided to simply outlast a situation. The Crown. The working royals, the palace machinery that keeps moving regardless of what any individual member does or says or publishes or streams. That institution is having a very different kind of 2026 than the Sussexes are having, and the contrast is becoming impossible to ignore. King Charles is still working, despite everything. Despite his health challenges, despite the weight of the transition, despite the noise coming from California, he is still showing up, still representing, still filling the schedule. William and Catherine are in a completely different public standing than they were 2 years ago. The image rehabilitation, the public warmth, the careful and consistent work of simply being present and doing the job it's landing. The numbers show it. The coverage shows it. The crowd sizes show it. And that contrast between the institution that keeps moving and the individuals who left it and are now trying to build something equivalent from scratch in Hollywood, that is the story underneath every other story we've been tracking. The Montecito Garden Party, the 44 photos, the variety piece, the Netflix rankings, the as-ever inventory on card tables, the $3,199 Australian tickets, the 43,000 signature petition. Every single one of those data points is a chapter in the same book. And the book is about what happens when you trade institutional permanence for individual brand building, and the brand doesn't build the way you planned. That's not a criticism. That's just the math. Institutions survive because they are bigger than any one person. Individual brands survive because the person is irreplaceable and the audience keeps showing up. And right now, the data, the rankings, the photo records, the petition signatures, the inventory on card tables is asking a very loud question about whether the audience is still showing up the way the brand needs them to. The Australian tour is the next real-time test. Not a controlled Netflix environment, not a pre-approved Getty photo drop, not a carefully worded spokesperson statement. A live, public, internationally covered tour in a Commonwealth country with its own strong opinions, its own media culture, and its own relationship to this story. And no one on any communications team in California can fully control what happens when the cameras are rolling and the crowd is real and the moment is live. That video is coming next because this story is not over. Not even close. Every chapter has been leading somewhere, and Melbourne might be where we finally find out where. If this breakdown gave you something the other outlets missed, if you saw the 44 photos differently after watching this, if the audition metaphor hit different, if you've been following this story and finally feel like someone laid out the full picture without the dress distraction, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm this kind of deep dive analysis is worth pushing to more people. Share this with someone who's been following the Sussex story, your group chat, your timeline, whoever in your life has opinions about this, because this conversation is bigger than any one channel and it deserves a wider audience. Subscribe so you don't miss the Melbourne breakdown when it drops, because that one is going to be something else entirely. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the Australian tour is going to change the narrative, or is the pattern already too established to shift? Tell me what you think. See you in the next one.